Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Monday, March 28th, and I hope you all had a great weekend. Hopefully as good of a weekend as the charts had because we saw some really nice price action. Bitcoin back above 47K for the first time in 2022, bringing a lot of alts up with it. So plenty to discuss today. But before we get started, CJ, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing well. A lot of explosive action, so it's been fun. Have some good price action lately, and looking forward to seeing how it keeps up in the equity markets as well. Pretty bullish day here today, or I guess just flat. But it's really nice to see Bitcoin have some strength regardless, and really break out of that ascending triangle that it's been spending virtually the past 2 months consolidating in. So it looks like the start of a new trend is potentially upon us, and it's promising to see a lot of traders just on Twitter still calling this like a scam rally or whatever, like a, not a true rally, but price action dictates all. So, anyways, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, doing well, CJ, doing well. And it's not just Bitcoin, right? We're seeing lots of alts move as well. And that's kind of characteristic of what we talk about in these crypto markets, where when Bitcoin starts to make a move, reclaims these levels that it's been struggling to overtake, like 45K, that brings back a lot of speculative confidence. And we're seeing people deploy capital into alts that haven't really moved since, back in the market top, like things like Filecoin, things like Polkadot, all starting to show some signs of momentum here now that Bitcoin is bringing back some more risk appetite to those speculative investors. So love to see that. Really makes those alts run. But yeah, like I said, lots to talk about. Would you like to start us off with some charts?
Yeah, I want to start off with the S&P. So S&P on the weekly charts at a very critical level. Um, these moving averages that have been pretty nicely at acting as a full bull market support, we are testing right back up into resistance, and we're actually starting to close above this top level, specifically the 20-week smooth moving average or the 20-week simple moving average. So that's quite interesting, and I think that could be very bullish for the future of the trend. I think there's still a lot of people who are just very macro bearish, just because we went up so much over the last year, but still, price action is looking pretty bullish if we can reclaim this level and actually consolidate above here throughout the week. This week is really going to be critical for both Bitcoin and equities because we are just starting to reclaim a lot of these really critical levels that we spend virtually the past 2 months below. But we have ARK really having a nice morning. A lot of these stocks are bouncing back. Oil is, going down, testing roughly 105 to 100 once again. Wow, still have a lot of still have a lot of momentum in the VIX though, despite the Nasdaq being up 0.5%. So that's quite interesting. But let's get to Bitcoin because I do want to look at this weekly chart because we're at a critical point here. We've now retaken this bull market support, similar to how we have previously. And typically when we reclaim this level, we see rallies of 50 to 100%. At least in many of the alts, Bitcoin at this stage, probably a little less volatile. But when you look historically, when we reclaim this level, there's only been a few fake outs throughout the last couple of years. And I think one of them you could basically blame on a black swan event. Of course, you can't really see it, but if it didn't happen here with COVID, this is one that I do believe we would have rallied to new all-time highs had we not had the COVID black swan. We had the bull market really building off the halving narrative already, and we were really beginning to trend. But I think when you talk about price action formations and things like ascending triangles at the bottom of downtrends, our most recent breakout is a little bit more similar to, I think, the bottom at what we saw, because we did spend quite a lot of time, especially when you look at it on the daily chart. It looks much more similar to the formation that we formed at the bottom here in 2019. And this caught a lot of people off guard because they just didn't think Bitcoin could be bullish after prolonged period of downtrend, basically over a year of just continuous lower highs. And we are seeing somewhat of a similar candle. It doesn't have the violence and magnitude off the bottom that this one did. Nonetheless, we are reclaiming that level and really looking at one of these potential breakout rallies that we've gotten historically. Each time throughout the past 2 years, or I guess 4 years now, really going back to 2018, when you break this level on the upside on the weekly chart, typically you get some nice rallies, and that's just what we've seen. So very bullish to be back above the bull market support bands. Also, another weekly milestone that I should mention is that we've now reclaimed the 50-week moving average. So a lot of individuals will point to that in many times saying, all right, if we're above that level, therefore we're in a bull market, or, if we're below that level, therefore we're in a bear market. I think it's probably more useful to just think in terms of momentum. But as you can see, that was one level we had to really touch back in July before moving much higher. So we'll see if this level does actually form resistance, say if we get a rejection back down to the 40 level. Either way, 42K is the critical level here. And I'd be pretty concerned if we lost that at this point. But we've put ourselves a good amount, good distance away from there. So really, when we look at logarithmic growth curves, this is one we've been tracking for a while now too. We've been in relatively fair value for Bitcoin and are still somewhat in fair value territory. If you look at the grand scheme of bull market trends, this is a decent accumulation phase that we are still in and are just starting to break out of. So that's really promising. As you can see, we've really broken this range and have, are looking to flip this from previous resistance to now new support at roughly 45K. So if we were to retest a bearish level, 45K is ultimately where I would look for, a potential retest and then, hopefully some type of bounce from that level. But overall, this is the range and the potential target I'm looking to play over this next coming weeks. Say we get a retest of this potential level. Overall, I'm looking for, roughly 55 to 62 for potential price targets in the coming weeks due to the breakout of that range. You can see similar price action to what we've done historically when we broke out the last time during the summer. We got above the first level, but then we had to retest, form support, and then ultimately topped out at these resistance levels. We're able to find support, and these are going to be critical. But typically, we do use these levels like very accurately throughout the trend. So to see that we're actually breaking above it, and now that we have like quite a lot of room upwards to go, I think that's pretty promising for the overall trend. Definitely a lot of other things we can look at, and many altcoins that are really in good positions as well.
Yeah. Why don't we take a look at a couple alts? Because, like we said at the start of the show, it seems like lots of that risk tolerance that's been missing from the market over the last couple months is starting to come back here. And that makes sense given what you just talked about from a weekly perspective. And we're seeing Bitcoin break out of some critical levels. And as a result, it seems like people are, willing to take more risk and are kind of doing a little bit of bottom fishing here, looking for some alts that have been beat up pretty hard. And that includes things like Solana, right? Solana was or is still 60% off its all-time high. It was, as much as 75 to 80% off its all-time high. But as you can see here, starting to show signs of positive price action. It's actually, outperforming relative to Bitcoin today. And again, it's up above that 20-period smooth moving average, seeing relatively strong volume here as we, kind of bounce from the bottom. And I think that this is one that has, some tremendous potential here over the next couple of weeks if we see a continuation of positive price action in Bitcoin, because, as a result, we're seeing speculators pile back in. And this one, Solana in particular, has been a massive benefactor of retail speculation in the past. And I think it will again here going forward. So Now that people are kind of feeling more conviction that the bottom is in, particularly with Bitcoin, I think we're going to start seeing them deploy more capital into some of these alts that are still significantly off their all-time highs. Another example of this is Cardano, right? Cardano has taken a real beating here since the market top. It didn't even really have that second pump that a lot of assets did. But now that we are, really below $1, we started to turn up, had some resistance at $1, but are reclaiming that level. Have this 20-period smooth moving average turning up, and it seems like speculators are willing to take a risk on this thing, given the fact that it's still significantly off its all-time high of around $3. So across the board, it seems like people are more willing to take risk. That being said, we're also seeing continuation of positive price action in alts that have looked strong over the last couple of weeks. I mean, ETH continuing to look very strong. We also got Luna, continuing its march higher. But I think we could look to Luna as an example of what we can see from a lot of these other altcoins here over the next couple of weeks in terms of reclaiming all-time highs. I mean, Luna really just skyrocketed back up to its previous all-time high with little to no resistance in between. And that's something that you'll see often in crypto when you have an asset that retraced and then is kind of retracing back up to all-time highs. It won't really hit resistance until we get to those two extremes. So I think that that's now a possibility with a lot of these alts, including the ones I just mentioned, like Solana and Cardano, that are still significantly off their all-time highs. So really interesting and encouraging to see lots of speculative, behavior coming back to this market. I think that's what you want to see if you are a, altcoin investor, kind of hunting for that higher beta. That's typically what, benefits most when we have these periods of risk on price action. So lots of encouraging signs here, CJ. I think it's going to be a really interesting week. But anything else that you're watching here as we start this Monday?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the volume that we've seen. And I don't think this is particularly bearish. I actually think this is an instance where not having like a massive surge in volume is not really a bad thing, because there's more sidelined capital in crypto and in equities than there has been in a very long time, because of the fear around Ukraine, oil, threats of recession. All of that is very concerning. And, a lot of people don't want to allocate large amounts of capital. So we have sidelined. In other words, we have ammo for the bulls to go back in and push price much higher. Think about the broader context of the trend. Maybe you need an initial surge of volume to get you out of the range, but we're already out of that range, pretty decently. Where you don't want to see a decrease in volume is like at the top of at the top, because that means you basically have exhausted all of your buying pressure. But when you're just kind of grinding downwards and you're not showing a lot of volume, it means that, one, the bullish trend or the bearish trend is probably ending, which we kind of saw. And then when you have a rally where you can grind up like this and you're not using a lot of volume, that's pretty good, because at the bottom, typically that means like there's just people sidelined. And if we go higher, if we get a candle, something like this, where we go up into the 50s, that's going to make a lot of people jump back in and want to accumulate the alts and play them for short-term momentum. And that's the move that could really send us into the 55K range. And I think it's quite doable, because we still do have a lot of people calling for, this range. I mean, we were cautious as well, and being quite reserved, but things are looking quite bullish, even as we test up into resistance here. I think there's clearly been a change in the macro shift now that we've broken above that level. But regardless, looking forward to jumping into a lot of the alts, because there is a lot of really interesting stuff going on and potential for this market. And you have to take risks. I know you're probably you're not always comfortable buying. You shouldn't be comfortable every time you buy, because it can't be that easy, of course. But yeah, things are really interesting and shaping up here. So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a exciting week of price action, CJ. So I'm really looking forward to it. Before we wrap things up here, how about we just quickly hit Coinbase for Robbie? I think that what we're seeing now in terms of Bitcoin could try and translate to some positive price action for Coinbase. But just taking a look at the charts here, you could apply a similar thing to Coinbase as to what I said about Solana or Cardano, where this thing has retraced significantly from its all-time highs when we were making all-time highs in Bitcoin. No surprise that they are significantly correlated. But as you can see now, it seems like people are somewhat willing to take some risk here now that Bitcoin is coming back up. We are moving back above the 20-period smooth moving average. But one thing that concerns me about Coinbase, and I've said this a few times in the past, is that it trades too much in tandem with Bitcoin, where if I wanted exposure to Coinbase, I would expect it more to show a little bit of divergence in the sense that even on very negative days for Bitcoin's price action, Coinbase could still gain positive speculation, because as an exchange they benefit from volume regardless of the direction. If it's bearish or bullish, it doesn't matter for Coinbase. They're still making profit on each one of those transactions. But that's not at all what we've seen historically. It's more or less been pegged to Bitcoin. So if I'm looking for exposure to Bitcoin, then I just buy Bitcoin, or even some of the alts that are the higher beta ones that we talk about. So I do think Coinbase will perform well if Bitcoin continues to grind higher. That being said, I think you could get more bang for your buck by just buying Bitcoin outright or looking to diversify into some of those higher beta altcoins. So Coinbase is looking somewhat interesting, but I'm still not buying here.
Unless you want to like leverage it with options, I think it's a better play to just own high beta alts as opposed to Coinbase. Yeah, we did just see some riot calls come through for short-term April dated people betting bullish on that one. So that's quite interesting. Anyways, looking forward to seeing how this price action plays out, but a lot of opportunity, and excited to discuss the alts. Things like Near, Solana, AVAX, I think are in some really interesting positions. So we're going to get into those on the Doge of the Day for members only right after this. If you'd like to get access to that, you can check out the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed what you saw today, please like and subscribe. That helps us out quite a bit. So thank you guys, and hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.